3, 2, 1.
Welcome in, Husker Extra Podcast. I'm Chris. There's Parker. There's Steve. Monumental day on the podcast. This is episode number 200. We've reached the 200 podcast milestone. This will definitely be our best one yet. We're definitely not going to mail it in like we do most weeks on the podcast.
If we got 1% better every week, we'd be so good by now.
We'd be 200% better right now than we were.
I think the math checks out on that.
I don't think we're 200% better now than we were when you started. Maybe we are. I don't know. But you know what? We're going to push on. We got a lot to talk about. We were able to observe a Husker practice yesterday, though only one of us three actually observed it. We're going to talk a little Adrian Martinez. We're going to talk a little Nick Henrich. We're going to talk a little Xavier Betts. It's football season, people. We're 3 weeks and 2 days out from the first game. How about that? 23 days out from the first game right now. August 28th, Champaign, Illinois. Going to be here before we know it. So let's get right into it, right? I guess, do we want to start with what you saw at practice yesterday, Parker?
Sure. They stretched.
Yeah, it was great. Everybody looked good. They ran around.
Yeah.
They threw the ball.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you know, it was mostly like it was pretty – those things are mostly like the practical reason why Nebraska does that is for the TV stations and photographers to take advantage and have sort of fresh stuff to work with. So I guess basically, especially for the first time, like I'm gonna try. We didn't see any like team period type things. Yeah. Hardly even full groups like working together. So it was, you know, at one point, like Matt Zuckerman, okay, yeah, there's a sort of a top offensive line. But there wasn't much in the way of like, here's what you would come away with as a full starting lineup or anything like that. So honestly, a lot of it for me is just about seeing first impressions of guys that maybe you haven't seen before or you've heard have made some change to the body or whatever. And so I guess the most interesting things that came out of the 25 minutes and then subsequently talking with Matt Lubick and some of the offensive coaches afterward, the most newsworthy thing probably is Marquise Stepp's health, which is ahead of where Nebraska coaches and trainers thought he might be early in camp. He looked pretty good. Now, again, like today, Thursday, is the first day in full pads. We were there a little bit on Wednesday. So that's if he's got limitations, those are going to show through at this point when they put the pads on, when they go live and all that. But for what it was, which was early in a practice where they were just in helmets and shoulder pads, he looked pretty good. He was cutting, he was running, he was doing everything that the other running backs were doing. So that's going to make for a really interesting position battle there. And then the other thing was just seeing some guys physically. I mean, Nebraska's two freshman defensive linemen, Raquan Buckley and Jalen Weaver, are both massive people. They're 18. They have a long way to go, but you know, Nebraska looks like a Big Ten team on both trenches, and those guys certainly only add to that. Similar with the receiver group, you know, as a first time, I'd seen Latrell Neville, I guess, at a Friday Night Lights camp, but to see Latrell Neville and Camonte Grimes and Sean Hardy, the three freshman receivers, standing and running next to Samari Toure and Omar Manning and all those guys, it gives you an idea of sort of like where they're at physically. Same with Chancellor Brewington, who's a walk-on receiver transfer from Northern Arizona. All four of those guys are big, long, wide receivers. They fit right in basically with
kind of like us, big and long.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Rangy. They're rangy.
Big levers.
Yeah. Long lever. So that's sort of an interesting, I mean, those four guys, I mean, if you were to ask me today, do you think any of the four are going to make a big impact this fall? I mean, I would lean toward no. You never know with a freshman. But those guys have just added to what Nebraska's receiver room has become, which is largely a group of big, strong guys. And so that was probably the most interesting stuff. You don't take a lot of real deep substance out of it. But between that and them being relatively healthy at this point, you know, it was only 4 practices in at that on Wednesday, but you know, better to be healthy than not early on.
There you go.
Bass, you talked about it. What's that?
No, nothing. You know, one guy we didn't touch on, or you didn't touch on really there, Parker is the quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
Adrian Martinez. Perhaps you folks have heard of him. He'll be going into his 4th year as a starter this year. Has gotten a lot of, I don't know if you call it hype. Do you call it hype? Maybe. A lot of praise from coaches, teammates, just for how he's looked. Has apparently been very sharp. Sean Beckton yesterday, I thought, had some eye-opening comments, saying Adrian's looked the best he's ever seen him. It's a complete night and day difference from past years to this year on every front: leadership, physical, the way he looks physically, the way he's playing, all those sorts of things. And we all know he's going to be the guy. There's no surprises there, and he's going to have to be the guy and be healthy all year long if Nebraska wants to get to where it wants to go. And by all accounts, so far, he's fit the bill. Obviously, you got to go do it in the games, but so far it seems like Adrian's kind of lived up to the expectations that this team's had for him so far.
Yeah, through 5. I mean, through 5 practices. What's today? I think today was 6, and they put on full pads for the first time.
Yep.
We should make clear that we don't see any meaningful practice. So you're kind of just going on what people say.
Yeah. Simple. But like when you hear Sean Beckton say that, and then obviously we talk to other people just in the course of doing our jobs. I mean, how do you square what the sort of line on Adrian Martinez? Because I think there's been a lot of buzz about him through the first week, and he obviously has a lot of physical abilities, and they've also struggled overall as an offense the past 2 years. And Martinez playing inconsistently has been a piece of that puzzle. It's not the whole thing, obviously. It's more, the conversation is about more than just the quarterback. But he'd be the first to tell you he's turned it over too often and all that sort of stuff. So, like, how do you reconcile at this stage of Adrian's career how lofty the talk about him has been so far in camp?
Well, I look at it like it's a carryover from the spring. I mean, remember the spring conversation about him was positive too. And a lot of that was about the zip in his arm and how good a shape he was in. And that's carried over. It's all carried over. It's very genuine. I don't question it at all. I mean, I'm not questioning what Sean Beckton says. It seemed very real. Sean said it all with a big smile on his face. It's really, really, I know what people literally, as words are coming out of your mouth, people are rolling their eyes. I get it. Everybody's a skeptic about everything, but I think it's genuine. And it's a tribute to Adrian that he stuck through it all, continues to work really hard, got himself in great shape, got himself in a great place mentally. I think he just, when he talked to the media last week, he verbalized where he's at mentally, and it sounded perfect to me. Like he's playing with a chip on his shoulder, but also kind of with like a man with nothing to lose. That sounds pretty good to me. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if he has a huge season. But in part because they put pieces around him now too.
Yeah.
And that's primarily at receiver and tight end. And I think they're pretty good up front. We'll have to see it running back.
It's interesting to me because 2018 feels like a long time ago at this point for more than one reason, obviously. But some of the things that you saw him do as a freshman, you just thought, I mean, the sky's the limit for this guy. There's been a lot more than, like I said, there's been a lot more than one thing that's gone wrong over the 19 and the 20 season, not least of which is just a complete and utter revolving door at wide receiver. I mean, they don't have a single guy. We're going to talk about Xavier Betts. They do not have a single guy on scholarship. Well, they have one now with Wyatt Lever going on scholarship, but Wyatt Lever is the only scholarship wide receiver they have who was even on the roster in 2019. And he didn't play. They don't have a guy on the roster at wide receiver who appeared in a game before last year. It's a whole, they rebuilt the receiver room once when Scott first got here, and it didn't work at all. And now all of those guys are gone, and it's an entirely new set over the past 18 months or so. And if those guys really, Adrian said, I thought it was interesting last week, I asked him about that in general, and he said, well, it's funny you say that because it doesn't really feel like a new group to me because of the amount of work we got in the spring and all that. And so if they hit the ground running, which I think there is some if attached to that. I'm not going to just sort of blindly assume it's going to happen, but I wouldn't be shocked if it happens that way. If they hit the ground running, it has the potential to look a lot different than it did last year. And just that potential, I think, is really interesting, whether or not it actually comes to fruition, right away.
Yeah, he's fascinating. I mean, he's been fascinating for 3+ years now, and it hasn't waned at all for all the reasons you just outlined, Parker. He's so important to what this season can be or could be for the Huskers, to Scott Frost, to Trev Alberts, to any number of people associated with the athletic department. He's the guy, and he has to be the guy. And from the maturity standpoint part of it, he can obviously handle that, and he's showed that for years now. He showed that when he was a freshman coming here, and the first time he was standing up there doing interviews with us.
But there's also a difference between saying you're ready for that and believing you're ready for that, and then actually like understanding what it is and being at peace with it. And I think Adrian's talked a little bit about that, a little bit with the media, some on his own podcast and all that sort of stuff, about being sort of steeled for it and ready for it as a freshman. And then when it really hits you in the face, like one of the sort of memories that sticks with me about Adrian is the summer before his sophomore year at the road race, the Team Jack road race. There were every player on the roster's there, right? And they're all around. And the line for Adrian Martinez before his sophomore year, when he was starting to get like Heisman hype and all that, it was a block long, and when Adrian moved, it was like those old block phones you could play like the snake game. That was like what the line was for Adrian. Like when Adrian walked, the line just like moved with him. And that was sort of like more than maybe anything I've seen since Adrian's been here. That was like, you're like, holy cow, the amount of eyes on a 19-year-old kid at any given time. So I think one of the things that's been interesting to watch this spring and going into this preseason camp is just, you never know for sure, but it does seem like he's sort of at peace with who he is and what his role is. And it's a big one, at the school and in this football program.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. Like you said, it's easy to talk about it, and it's one thing to accept it. And some guys, it takes a while to accept a role like that. And it's taken Adrian a while. And if that turns out to be true, he's probably going to have a great year. And even if it turns out not to be true, he might be talented enough to still have a pretty good year because of the guys around him and how those guys are maybe better than what he's had before. So yeah, fascinating stuff as always about Adrian, for sure. One of the guys that's going to catch passes from Adrian is Xavier Betts this year. At least he hopes to catch passes from Adrian. And he spoke with the media yesterday, and I thought he was super, super open and honest just about, his development as a player after his freshman season last year, and the kind of the money quote from him. He said, "I'd say my desire to get better has grown a lot more since the spring. And the spring was there, but it wasn't as big and as deep as it should have been. And then over the summer, I kind of found ways to improve that." You just don't hear guys say stuff like that very often. You don't hear guys saying, my 1-2 just, it wasn't quite where it needed to be. And it's pretty clear he had an epiphany or had a come to Jesus talk or with somebody, whatever it may have been. He mentioned talking with his father about ways to get better, but to hear a guy that's going into his second year of college football, as a sophomore, and it has a lot of hype on him, not the same level that Adrian has, but to hear a guy just be honest about that and be open and saying, yeah, I didn't really have that desire that I needed to have, going into this off season. It was pretty refreshing, I thought, and pretty eye-opening for a guy that's got a ton of talent and flashed it, from time to time. He had obviously the 45-yard catch and run against Penn State where he took the jet sweep around the right side, outran a bunch of dudes to the end zone. Physically he fits what Nebraska wants. A lot of this focus this spring and this summer has been on Omar Manning, Samori Toure, and rightfully so. Those guys are really talented, but it almost seems like Xavier Betts has been overlooked a little bit. And he might be the the third best receiver on that team when it's all said, maybe the second best when it's all said and done. Who knows? He's got that kind of talent. So just fascinating to listen to him talk about what he kind of had to do as far as an attitude adjustment and to kind of try and take that next step as a player.
Simple. What did you think of Sean Beckton? How would you like it if they rolled out against Illinois and that Nebraska was starting with the ball and the two guys back deep to return to kickoff were Xavier Betts and Omar Manning?
Yeah, well, it looked good. I like the fact that Omar Manning and Xavier Betts are, they raise their hand and want to do that because it's a critical part of the team, and those guys are big. I mean, they're big time athletes. I mean, the jury's out as far as what kind of football players they are, but Betts showed me enough last year that he clearly has a lot of potential, and you saw him walk up there. I mean, he's 6'2", 200. I mean, he's good looking, and Omar Manning is too. So yeah, that's good. That kickoff return discussion just began. There's about 30 guys that are probably in that.
I think you're in the discussion right now. So.
Yeah, I mean, they just started it yesterday. So now the punt return's a little more defined. It seems like Cam Taylor-Britt. Cam Taylor-Britt's probably the leader, but Oliver Martin is there. Brody Belt is in that conversation, and so is Kamonte Grimes. Now, Beckton said Kamonte Grimes is probably someone they would look at down the road. It'll be Cam Taylor-Britt or Oliver Martin. The whole thing with Cam Taylor-Britt is you got to catch the ball. And Beckton said when he concentrates, he's really good. When he's got full concentration. Remember, he bobbled one against Iowa that really hurt him. I think he'll be Cam Taylor-Britt. He's dynamic. The thing about Taylor-Britt is he's really quick. Taylor-Britt is not super straight line fast, but he's super quick. And that's what you want. That first move is big, in that situation.
Yeah, it's interesting. Those were the two guys. Like last year, it was mostly Taylor-Britt in the middle part of the season, and then it was Taylor-Britt and Oliver Martin down the stretch. So to have both those guys coming back with experience doing it will help. I thought it was interesting, Baz. One more thing on Xavier Betts. I thought it was interesting that last week Adrian Martinez was asked in front of the whole group if there was somebody who he thought was a breakout candidate, and that's who he thought about it for a second and then said Xavier Betts. And I sort of took that in that moment, of course, I'm sure Adrian believes that. But it also sounded like an old guy lifting up a young guy who maybe, that the thing I thought in that moment, like, oh, well, in the spring, for the spring game, remember you got almost all the dudes on the red team and everybody else on the white team. And the coaching staff put Xavier Betts on the white team. He wasn't with that top group of receivers. He didn't play with Adrian at all. And so when Martinez said that, before the first day of camp, it sort of registered in my mind of a leader, and then a leader saying that about a guy maybe who could use it. And then Xavier Betts yesterday talked to you about that positive reinforcement from his teammates and how much that means to him. And thought, well, that shows you exactly why Adrian Martinez sort of went to that well last week.
Yeah, and Adrian wasn't the only one. Deontay Williams up at Big Ten Media Days said the same. He was asked about guys that could have breakout years, and Deontay said Xavier Betts, and that's a guy that's been here longer than Adrian. He's going into his 6th year of college football. 4 of them here at Nebraska. That guy's 23 years old, 24 years old. He's
36 years old.
36 years old. He's 47 years old. And again, another guy that's plays in the defensive backfield that's probably going up against Xavier Betts a lot in practice. A guy that's a leader, a guy that's kind of no nonsense, is going to tell you like it is. And mentioned Xavier Betts. And you're right. Xavier said, hearing it from my teammates and from those guys inside the program, he said that's the best way for him to hear it because it lets him know that he's doing what he needs to do, and his teammates are seeing that. And it makes it, Xavier said, it makes me want to go out and play better and play harder for them. So that stuff kind of feeds back on itself. So yeah, it's surely those guys as leaders see that, they're not, Adrian's not dumb. Deontay's not dumb. They know how to push guys' buttons. And that's one way it appears to get Xavier going. So that's 2 guys that played a lot of football for Nebraska. And like you said, I'm sure they believe that. I'm sure they're sincere when they say that, but they're also saying that to get a young guy going that they see has a lot of potential.
Hey, Baz, congratulations on a great use. Feedback gets used way too much, but that was a great usage of it. That's actually literally what feedback means.
Thank you.
What was the word?
He said and that's that it feeds back. It was like that's actually like a correct usage of feedback.
Feeds back upon itself, that positive reinforcement, making a guy play better. It's a snowball rolling downhill.
Yeah.
Hey, how about another young guy, Nick Henrich, another young guy that's been talked about a lot so far through these first few practices. Guy that's battled some injuries, but another guy from the Omaha area, ton of potential. Guy that has a chance to play a lot of football this year. I guess your guys' thoughts on young Nick at linebacker.
Yeah,
Parker, you're writing about him.
I just did, and I used most of the questions that you asked Barrett about it, so you can talk about it. I thought that was an interesting conversation, and I was there for part of it, and then Sybil, you were there for part of it. About if there's a guy like if Barrett Root's talking about like the finer points, like of course the guy knows, and a crazy amount just about football schematics, X's and O's, all that. But one of the things about Barrett is because he lived it for so long in the NFL, playing in the middle of defenses. I find it very interesting when he talks about the little things that maybe you don't notice if you just turn on the TV on Saturdays or Sundays. And that's what he's talking about with Nick Henrich is just Henrich has to find ways to keep himself on the field because he's dealt with injuries. I mean, dating back to high school, he missed part of his senior year of high school, wasn't available in some of the playoffs, and then tried to play in the state championship game, re-injured his knee. And then he was on campus, 6 weeks after that and missed spring ball, has had shoulder surgery. And so like, he's just, he's dealt with it early in his career. Now we've seen guys, JoJo Doman's a good example. Cam Jurgens is a good example, guys who have been sort of oft injured early in their career. And then they have a really long stretch of healthy, productive football. And so, it's not, you're not calling Nick Henrich injury prone or something like that, but he's dealt with injuries so far in his career. So Barrett, I thought was really interesting in talking about, he was asked about what's the next step for Nick. And it wasn't like figure out, fine tune the scheme. It wasn't figure out what offensive linemen are trying to do to him. It was, Barrett Root saying he's got to find a routine that helps him stay on the field. And that
prehab.
Yeah. Use
I do that prehab.
What that sounded like to me, the answer was like, it's a lot of work. Like the maintenance element of it, once you've had those kind of injuries in football is a lot of work. It's, as you said, Baz, prehabbing. I mean, Barrett said, you got a shoulder injury. Maybe there's a shoulder routine you do in the weight room or the training room every day after practice to sort of protect yourself. Like those are the things that I think your average fan doesn't necessarily, your mind doesn't go there. It's about tackling dummies or film or whatever. But these are the things that are sort of that are in Nick Henrich's present and future, in Barrett Root's eyes, at least, that are going to help him be on the field a lot. And Barrett, I mean, like, it was almost like an afterthought. I mean, Barrett Root said, if he's on the field, he's going to be really productive for us. So you just got to be on the field. So I thought that was very interesting. I just thought it was an interesting conversation all around. What were you thinking as you were talking with Barrett about it, Sybil?
Well, I mean, I didn't even know what Chenander was saying. I think almost simultaneously that Henrich was was one of the better players on the team in the spring, which is a revelation in itself. And it's interesting. I mean, that's good. I mean, that top group of inside linebackers is pretty good. And if Henrich is one of the best players on the team, that bodes well for everybody. Reimer, Henrich, and Kolarevich, they're pretty good at the top of that depth chart. Now they got some work to do after that. They got a bunch of young guys that really need to step up. Well, in fact, they don't even have a lot of young guys that need to step up. They have about 3. So Barrett is looking for depth, but I'd feel really comfortable with those top 3. But again, Reimer's been hurt a lot too. If you roll into Oklahoma without one of those guys, it's a little scary. And if you roll into Oklahoma without two of them, forget it. Oklahoma will score 60. They'll score 60.
Not only that, simple, like those two guys, those guys have dealt with injuries at Nebraska, but Kolarevic missed half of the 18 season and then half of the 19 season, bridged, almost a full year because of a foot injury. So he's dealt with it too in his college career. So three guys that are potentially dynamic players that Nebraska really likes. And I think it's maybe a little dramatic to say the fortunes of the defense, but maybe not. I mean, those are the three guys you got to play in the middle of your defense. And if they can stay on the field and be productive and play in 10, 11, 12 games each, you're going to be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, and I don't mean any disrespect to Jake Snodgrass or Ativa Maga Clements.
Garrett.
They're just young guys.
It's Garrett Snodgrass.
Yeah. Who's Jake Snodgrass?
He's a part-time.
Text me all the time.
Part-time.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, Garrett. They're just young guys.
Yeah, right.
And, they're not getting the lion's share of the reps. So, like I say, I mean, if you throw them in there against Oklahoma, man, it's going to be rough. And I'm sure Barrett has that in the back of his mind when he's talking about those guys need to stay healthy.
Yeah.
That's a big test. I mean, I was reading about Oklahoma. That game is scary. It's a scary ass game in Norman.
Usually is down there in Norman, America. We'll be making a trip down here in a month or so.
Norman, America.
Barrett mentioned special teams when he was talking about that. Like that's why you need more than just a couple guys. And I think it really makes a big difference. And again, it's sort of like you say, simple. It's not to limit the potential roles of a Garrett Snodgrass or a Malga Clements or whatever to only special teams. But those guys are going to be asked, like Garrett Snodgrass was last year a core special teams player, and he's going to be asked to be that again, I'm sure. And if you have those guys and Jackson Hanna, or even one of the young guys, maybe for 4 games, Kapai or Malcolm or Wyndon Hohuli or whoever it is, like if you're at least getting high quality, upper echelon special teams reps from those guys, then maybe you feel like you don't have to put Luke Reimer on a kickoff team, or something like that. And so, but if you can't, like if you're getting, to use a baseball term, replacement level special teams play from the guys that are a little further down the depth chart, you might feel like you got to have Kolarevic or Reimer or someone on your coverage units. And then you're sort of taxing those guys further. So important all around for the depth to continue developing there.
That's some good football talk, fellas.
Any hoops? What's going on in hoops?
Not much hoops. Wrapped up summer workouts earlier this week. Guys have scattered back to their homes here for a couple of weeks. They'll get a couple of weeks off. That includes the coaching staff. They're getting some vacation in right now. They'll reconvene right about the time school starts. That's when they expect Kesey Tominaga to arrive on campus as well. He's the only player that hasn't gotten to town yet. So by all accounts, strong summer. Got through it relatively healthy. They got Lat Mayan going a little bit at the end. He's been battling a little bit of a back issue. Got him going a little bit there at the end of the workout. So that's a positive sign. But yeah, I think they feel really good with where they're at. I think Fred Hoiberg's pretty content with where things are right now, and now you get them back in the fall and get your 4 hours per week until official practice starts. And then you're off and running. They're going to be playing Colorado in that exhibition game here before we know it at the end of Colorado. So getting close, but yeah, solid summer by all accounts for the basketball team. Now a couple weeks off.
All right. What's that? So what is the date of that exhibition? Do you know off the top of your head?
October 30th, I believe. It's public information. We can look it up here.
It's public information.
Very public. I'm on the website right now, basketball schedule. They got Peru State exhibition October 27th, Colorado exhibition on Halloween. So that'll be a Halloween game. It's at noon on Halloween. So you can come watch the exhibition, then go put your costume on, go trick-or-treating if you want. Then the official season opener is November 9th. So a little over a week later against Western Illinois. So yeah, those are the kind of the dates to keep in mind. They get to start, I believe, they can start practice 40 days before their first game. And so that would put you into September, first regular season game. So that's put you in the end of September before you can start official practices. So again, month and a half away from starting hoops practice, and we're 2 months away basically from the season getting started. So it's not far, not far away.
It's all
Anything
happening.
else? It's all happening. It's going to happen. We're going to play a football game in 23 days, hopefully. We've got our credentials approved for Illinois.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
We're ready to road trip.
Baz is going to be, it's going to be a heck of a car ride over there. And then Baz
Oh,
is
I'm going to be absolutely
and
unbearable in the car. I haven't gone on a road trip since 2019. So I'm going to be just a complete ass in the car for like 8
Wow.
And then how many
What's
custards
that?
are you going to hammer in the
Oh,
press?
well, the last time I was there, I think I had 4. I had so many it made me sick, and I'm a grown adult. So that tells you about what my willpower. They have this great custard place in Champaign, Illinois, for those that don't know what we're talking about. I forget the name of it, but it's incredible. And they have it in the press box there. And they had this lemon custard,
Lemon.
little styrofoam containers. And your boy was smashing those at halftime and into the third quarter of a game that came down to like the last possession. So I was really locked into what was going on for most of that game. So looking forward to just doing horrible things with the local cuisine back on the road again.
You had one custard for every tough Wandale Robinson run in the second half.
It's about right. Yeah, that's about it. Remember Wandale? What a time that was.
I said, give me the
He's
rock.
calling for the ball.
I told
He's
Coach
calling
Puff,
for
give me
it.
the rock.
He was doing this, and it wasn't to come out. It was to feed me. He's doing
Yeah,
this.
Yeah, he was doing
that.
that. Yeah, he was asking for the ball.
All right, guys. We're going to wrap this baby up. 200 episodes. Shout out to everyone who's tuned in for all 200. If you have, then what's wrong with you? But we'll have hopefully 200 more coming down the pike. Not all at once. That would be crazy. But thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week.